it now as a weightlifter, before I stopped running, I found that weightlifting actually helped improve my stamina for running, but on the reverse, running improved my endurance for the longer weightlifting sessions where it was lighter weights and more reps.
Okay. Okay.
You are listening to the No Gimmicks, Just Sweat podcast with your host, Eric Logan. No Gimmicks, Just Sweat is dedicated to hearing the journeys and unique stories behind an athlete's training and what drives them. Get inspired to own your life and make the impossible possible. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Also, please take a few seconds to rate the show and drop me a review. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello and welcome to this episode of No Gimmicks, Just Sweat. And today we welcome Holly Spicer to the show. Holly, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm great this morning. Thank you for coming on the show.
No, and thank you for having me.
All right. As always with every episode, we start with a little warm up, break the ice a little bit so the listeners can kind of get to know who you are, as well as sometimes I learn something new about each guest. So, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. Morning training or evening training?
Oh, that's tricky. It depends on the time. It depends on the time of year. In the cooler months, I tend to do more midday training, late morning, early afternoon, because that's when it's warmer. And in the summertime, I'm usually out there later in the day because that's just where my schedule allows me the time to be out there. And opposite to the winter time, that's when it's cooler and I'm not out there dying in the heat and the humidity.
Okay. All right. This one, it might be obvious, but I'm going to ask because who knows, you may surprise me. Cardio training or strength training?
It's mostly strength training, but sometimes I do surprise everyone, and strength training will kind of take a back seat, and I'll focus a little bit more on the cardio. And this year, actually, that's part of my goal is to get back into running more consistently. There's a couple of road races that are making an appearance here again that I usually run. They're my annual races. So I think I need to dust off the running shoes and get back at it.
All right. Your favorite outdoor activity?
Oh, my favorite outdoor activity would probably be kayaking or paddleboarding.
Okay. Your favorite exercise or form of cross training?
Nothing feels as good as a good track day workout that has a little bit of everything in it, some speed work, strength training, that explosive stuff, just kind of a little bit of everything. Those are always my favorites. I definitely don't do them as much as I used to anymore, though.
Okay. All right. What's your least favorite exercise?
Burpees.
Who loves burpees?
I don't know. I've yet to meet anyone that likes burpees.
I know when I teach classes, I said, we do not do burpees in this class. I've had one student go like, really? I like burpees. And I'm like, okay, you can do burpees while everybody else is doing this. All right. First thing you do after a workout?
Eat.
Anything that's particular that you eat? A favorite go-to meal?
Usually it's a granola bar, yogurt, maybe some string cheese. It depends on how long I've been at it and what type of workout it was. If it was a heavy singles day or a day where I need to max out, or even a day where there was a lot of high intensity stuff, definitely go for a more heavy carb loaded meal.
Okay. All right. A dream race or event that you want to participate in?
I would love to qualify for the American Open with USA weightlifting in the Masters division.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Last one. If you can train with any celebrity or athlete, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh, that's tricky because the power lifter in me would love to go out and train with CT Fletcher, but
Okay.
the weightlifter in me would really like to connect with either Catherine Nye or Maddie Rogers.
Okay. CT Fletcher scares me sometimes. When I see the videos, I'm like, ooh, I would hate to go to the gym with him. But I know it'll be a positive experience. But
Yeah.
yeah. All right. So at this point, we kind of want to hear about you. So, what is your origin story? How did you become the athlete that you are now? You know, everybody has a starting point. So, what's your starting point, and how did you progress to get to where you are?
Well, I was an athlete in school, soccer, basketball, softball until my school got lacrosse, and then I made the change to lacrosse. My senior year, I had to abandon all sports and go from working part-time to full-time if I wanted to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
And the colleges that I went to, they didn't really offer sports because they were smaller colleges. I did kind of like a community thing through a couple of community schools in the area. And so I kind of fell off of being active for a little while. And I realized that it was a really good outlet for my struggles with depression and anxiety. And I went to Walmart and I bought a VHS tape of an at-home workout, and I started there, but it just wasn't enough. And I walked into a commercial gym for the first time in 2003. And I was there for 13 years. And it basically harbored my career as a competitive powerlifter. And powerlifting became a thing because leaving an abusive relationship, I just never wanted to feel weak in any way, mentally or physically again. And powerlifting was that perfect outlet for me because the whole point of powerlifting is to lift more and more and more each time. So you're getting physically stronger, and it's quite a mental game too, because you've got to be in that right mindset or else you're just not going to make that progress.
Right.
And it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, my drive to get back to being active, because in my mid-20s, I was first diagnosed with a spinal disorder called spondylosis, which affects your spinal cord. And through specialists, it was actually determined that I have a spinal disease called spondylolisthesis. And what that is your vertebra actually shift.
Oh.
And it is incredibly painful. And unfortunately, where it took me so long to get my diagnosis, I built up a pain tolerance, a higher pain threshold. So I didn't realize that it was as bad as it was. But every doctor I saw credited my active lifestyle of the running I was doing, the weightlifting I was doing. They said that if I hadn't have been so active, it would have been far worse than it was. And every year since, when I go for my annual checkups to monitor the progress of the disorder, they say the same thing over and over again. I'm basically keeping it in a homeostasis, so to speak, by staying active. So that now that I'm in a healthier relationship, I have a healthier mindset through therapy with my mental illnesses. The thing that keeps me going now is knowing that staying active and doing all of these things keeps my body moving so I can be present with my partner and be present with my son, be present with friends when we go out hiking or kayaking, go swimming in the ocean, just do general life things. Like even going to the grocery store, I can do
Right.
that hindered because I'm doing all of these things to keep my spinal disorder in a place where it allows me to keep using my body freely.
Right. So before we go into things, the first thing I want to kind of remind people is that A VHS is what we used to watch videos on back in the day.
Exactly.
So when you mentioned a VHS tape, I'm like, yeah, those would be some people that probably not really know what a VHS tape is. It's before DVDs.
Yep. Definitely dates us there.
Yeah, it dates us. All right. So before we kind of go into really your training and stuff, you talking about powerlifting for people who might not be familiar with the sport of powerlifting. Can you give a brief explanation of it?
Yep. Powerlifting focuses basically on three big lifts: your squat, your deadlift, and your bench. And the goal with each of those is to, if you're going to compete, the goal is to execute those three moves to a certain set of guidelines. And it's different. And that's the tricky thing. It's different for every sport. Like with powerlifting, when you're deadlifting, you can't do what they call hitch the weight up. It has to be a smooth, fluid movement to your lockout if you want to get those beloved 3 white lights. And if you get the 3 white lights, then you've successfully completed the lifts to those parameters. And if you happen to be the one lifting the most, then you get to take home the shiny medal or the plaque or even the little trophy that some competitions give you.
Okay. And, I think that some people, kind of confuse or kind of blend in powerlifting sometimes with bodybuilding, because they think like, okay, if I get big muscles and, if I'm built like The Rock, then I'm a powerlifter.
Yeah.
I tell people, I'm like, that's not necessarily the case, because I've watched some of the powerlifting shows on ESPN and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them aren't that, how can I say it? Statuous, for lack of a better term.
Yep.
That's a word. But, they're more, how can I say, meaty, beefy.
Yeah, the power lifters are definitely a lot thicker.
Right.
I mean, the running thing from my years in powerlifting was always the reference to the power belly.
Yes.
That barrel, you'd be a little bit barrel chested with the broader stomach, and the strength was there. You just couldn't see the strength because there was you had other layers there.
Right. And, you really don't hear much about, well, at least back in the day, you generally associate powerlifting with men. But if you kind of really look into it, you see that there are quite a few women who are powerlifters.
Actually, when I started, it's been such a wild thing to watch how much powerlifting with women has grown in the 20 years that I've been lifting weights. Because when I started, I remember my very first competition, I went with a really good college friend of mine, and her boyfriend at the time, who he was competing too, but he also was what they call a handler for the day. And it was her, myself, and just one other woman. And my last powerlifting competition that I did, I was one of 8 women in my weightlifting class. So that's just how much that it grew in the 13 years that I was actively competing in the sport. But since then, I've been out for about 5, almost 6 years now. But it's just, it's its own being now. Same with strong women. I've seen a lot of growth in the strongman competitions with women too. So a lot more women are realizing that it is okay to lift heavy weight.
Yes. Great training. I am a huge advocate of that, and I say it's not necessary to build your muscle. Again, you're not trying to be built like The Rock or whomever. It's just you're trying to build strength and maintain strength for a longer life.
Yeah.
So it's okay to lift weights. It's okay to lift. You don't have. It's not about bulking up. It's just about maintaining strength.
Yeah. And it takes, and I think one of the misconceptions is because it has been so ingrained in us women, because I remember my very first personal trainer that I worked with gave me a very low weight low rep, low set, kind of strength training workout. And I knew that wasn't what I wanted, because I wanted to put muscle on. I wanted to
Right.
change the way my body looked. I wanted to
Right.
carry myself differently. But the whole mindset that women lifting weights makes them bulky, it's not that easy for us women to bulk up to be like The Rock.
Right.
We'd have to do a lot more than lift weights to be built like The Rock. And a lot of, I mean, for some people, they're willing to go that route, but for the
Right.
average human being just wanting to get strong, you could do it for 20, 30, 40 years and you're never going to be as big as The Rock.
Right. Exactly. You know, it's just an understanding of how that works, you know, and everything involved, as well as how your body accepts that.
Yep.
All right. So let's talk about training. So what does a day and even a week of training for you look like? And do you work with a coach, or do you self-coach?
Right now, I am working with Amy Everett of Catalyst Athletics, with her Amy's Ladies. It's a weightlifting program. I'm currently doing that 4 times a week, right here in my garage. I spent 2 months in a gym because it was a little too cold to be out there, but I'm back in my garage now. And 2 of those days are spent primarily on working on the different parts of a snatch or a clean and jerk. Then there's a technique day in there, and then there's a day in there where it's not go big or go home, but it's really focusing on moving up the weight and creating that strength. So when I go into the next week, I'm working with higher volumes. And then the next week after that, I'm working to higher volumes. The end goal being, when I make it to my next meet in April, I'm able to better my overall total between the 2 lifts compared to my meet that I did in October.
Okay. So with powerlifting, I know with, athletes such as runners, and endurance athletes, there's a particular, for lack of a better term, diet that, they try to follow, particular thing they have to fuel in order to kind of maintain and be able to go the distance. How does that look for a powerlifter?
With powerlifting, I was definitely consuming a lot more calories than I do now as a weightlifter. Because I was definitely moving the weight is different. So I was able to actually move a significant more amount of weight in powerlifting. But I was one of those powerlifters that midway through the workout, you would see me sitting on the bench in the gym, or I'd have to, when I switched from using a gym to working out at home 7 years ago, I'd have to come into the house to stuff my face before I could finish the workout, because I'd just be too hungry. I couldn't focus on the next set or the next rep.
Right.
It's kind of another thing that, like, in the community of powerlifters, when I was a part of it, we would talk about that interset. You had to eat something interset, or you couldn't finish it because you just get so hungry, especially on those heavy days. With weightlifting, it's a little different. I'm eating more carbs than I am proteins with weightlifting, because I need that energy, because the movements with the snatch or the clean and the jerk, there's a lot more explosiveness in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to be able to have that energy up so I can move snappy and peppy, or else the weights aren't going anywhere. And I actually, last summer, I worked with Black Iron Nutrition to kind of dial in a more friendly nutrition plan for that pairs with my the issues that I have with my polycystic ovarian syndrome. Because with PCOS, some people have to be kind of careful around their carb consumption.
Oh.
And as I've gotten older, it's kind of shifted beyond my own scope as a nutritionist. So it was time to bring some outside help in. And I've just recently signed back up with Black Iron Nutrition, and I'm working with them on a more performance base now to kind of really dial in my performance so that when I do get to my meet in April, it's not just a little bit of improvement from October. Hopefully it's a significant improvement, because my ultimate goal is to qualify for the American Open in the Masters division.
Okay. So what is the American Open, if I can ask?
It's basically for each different age division and each weight class, there is a certain total. And if you do a USA weightlifting sanctioned meet and it's a qualifying meet for the American Open, then you can use that event as a qualifier for the Open. And then it's kind of like, I don't want to call it the amateur weightlifters version of like the Olympics, because it kind of, a lot of people who hope to go to the Olympics use that to kind of like keep going to the Open, and then there's the nationals, and then there's the Pan Ams and the Worlds.
Okay.
But it's definitely for someone like me who is an amateur masters athlete. It's definitely my hope of like the big scale competition. It's not like a home meet, or even last year I did the International Weightlifting Day meet, and it was with people from all around the country. Of course, we had to do it on Zoom because of the pandemic restrictions. So I couldn't go to a gym that was sanctioned through USAW and do it, but that kind of gave me a taste for doing it beyond just like the gym meets that are sanctioned. It'd be awesome to compete against other top masters athletes in my age class and my weight class, from all around the country and Canada. And it's fun.
Okay. And let's kind of go back to 2020 now. So with the, we don't like to revisit, but it's always interesting to hear how people, kind of cope with things during that time. I know for, runners like myself, endurance athletes like myself, all our races were canceled.
Yeah.
So we had to kind of approach things a little bit differently as far as training and what to do now. We had, normally on Saturdays I'm running a race. I'm not doing that this year. So how did that affect you, or if it did, once things closed down?
Well, for starters, the pandemic took away my running drive. I actually stopped running in September of 2020. I was kind of trying to hold on to it, hoping that, like some of my races would come back, and everything just was being canceled. And then, because I'm a sports reporter and my sports season started to pick up around September when schools returned back in hybrid and in person. Our schools kind of did a little bit of everything around here. So I started getting busy again with sports. My son had just started school in kindergarten. So something needed to go, and I didn't have a race to train for to try to be faster than the year before. So running was the one that got crossed off the list, unfortunately. And now with a puppy, I'm hoping to get back into it, A, for exercise for her, and B, because I've heard through the grapevine that a couple of my favorite races locally are going to come back this summer. So I don't want to miss them. Even if I'm absolutely terrible compared to the last time I ran it, it's just getting back into the rhythm of things. But strength training wise, with weightlifting, I didn't miss a beat because I was one of the fortunate ones that already had a home gym set up.
Yes.
So while everyone else was scrambling, trying to buy weights before everything started skyrocketing price wise there, I was splitting my time between lifting on my deck in the sun, or working out in my garage or in my basement, wherever I needed to be for whatever the day's training called for.
Okay. So you're also a runner.
Yep.
So how does that kind of translate, being, that you're, focused at strength and, powerlifting? How does that translate to you as a runner? Does it help out? Does it hinder it? Are you more, does it help with speed? It does help with your stamina, your endurance? What's the effect on that with you?
Well, I tried a couple of long distance races. I've done a marathon and I've done a couple of half marathons over the years.
Okay.
As a power lifter, you definitely don't have the speed. You're just doing it because you love to run. And I think to an extent, being a runner and a power lifter at the same time worked to my advantage, because especially with squats and deadlifts, where I've always, being a soccer player growing up, I've always had stronger legs. I had a lot of strength in my legs for the powerlifting, and it translated pretty well to running the shorter distances like the 5Ks and the 10Ks. But it kept my weight down so I could enter in the smaller weight classes, and I would do better because I was smaller and lifting more because of the legs, the leg drive and everything. My bench was always terrible, and I'm pretty sure my bench will always be terrible, but that doesn't tie into running in any way. So there was really no way that I could make both work for that particular lift. And it now, as a weightlifter, before I stopped running, I found that weightlifting actually helped improve my stamina for running, but on the reverse, running improved my endurance for the longer weightlifting sessions where it was lighter weights and more reps.
Okay. Interesting. So what inspires you? Is there anything or anyone that inspires you to kind of keep going and just doing what you're doing?
I'm one of the rare people from my generation that grew up with great grandparents. Mm-hmm. And on my father's side, his parents were well into their 90s before we lost them. And they were very active people. They did roller skating. They danced.
Oh, wow.
And all of my memories from being with my dad's parents, it was always us doing something active. We would walk. We have a breakwater path that leads out to one of our local lighthouses. We were always walking that with them. We were going roller skating with my grandfather all the time when we still had a roller rink, and just remembering them being so able-bodied well into their 70s and 80s before they started to have some level of deterioration. I carry that with me every day, and every choice that I make, either if it's a day that I'm not working out, what can I do for active recovery? Go for a hike, just go for a walk around town. If it's warm, grab my kayak and put it on the car and go for a paddle. Go for a swim in the ocean, just anything to keep my body moving, even if it's a day that I'm not intentionally training, because I've seen the value of a moving body. And they say a body in motion stays in motion. And I really feel like my dad's parents were definitely the epitome of that.
Yes, definitely. So as an athlete, finding balance is something that we all struggle with. How do you manage to stay balanced and calm? And how do you find your balance and calmness with having such a busy life?
Well, I don't know how calm I would say I am. So some days I feel like I'm screaming and tearing my hair out, trying to make everything work, and going to bed with things inevitably still not crossed off the list. it's a lot of prioritizing. I mean, I've got a full-time job, and my job is pretty crazy with the schedule. Each sports start at different times of the day. Like right now, my sports don't start any earlier than 5:30 at night. So it gives me a little bit more leeway during the day. So training and having access to time to train in the wintertime for me is easier. Warmer weather sports, things get a little hairy. Because my sports will start anywhere from 1 o'clock in the afternoon to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So those are the times that I'm usually trying to squeeze something out either while dinner's cooking or just after I've eaten dinner. It's a lot of dancing around different things to find the steps that work. And then of course my son, now he's old enough that he's starting to play sports, so it's taking him to sports, covering sports, and then just finding time to just sit down and take a breath, read, or do something to decompress so I don't feel so crazy trying to make everything work.
Right.
Some days it works, some days it's a hot mess, and I take the days that it works and I hold them tight and try to repeat the magic the next day. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, I try not to let it carry into the following day, because otherwise it's just going to be disaster.
Right, right. So you reading anything good right now?
I actually just finished a book, into tapping back into my my fantasy love. It's fantasy, thriller, suspense, horror. Those are my favorite kind of genres.
Okay.
So I've been doing a lot of reading about witches and werewolves and things that go bump in the night.
It just take you away from reality for a moment.
Exactly. Something that doesn't seem like it could actually potentially happen, because I've read too many of those books in these past couple of years. I find myself looking out the window waiting to see a zombie walk by, or so anything that seems like it might hover on the potentially can happen scale, those books are going to stay on my bookshelf for a little while longer.
I'll get to those later.
Yep.
All right. This is kind of a two-part question here. So what is your proudest moment as an athlete? And then the second part of that question, what is your worst moment or biggest mistake as an athlete?
So my proudest moment as an athlete would probably, and it's interesting because it's actually not tied to anything strength training related.
Okay.
Would actually be the day I finally ran, we call it the firecracker race. And they run by my house every year, 4th of July. And it's always the hottest day of the year. It's always, by the time the race starts at 8 o'clock in the morning, it's already 90 degrees with 100% humidity. And my road is a very hilly road, and there's no shade on the road. So it's kind of been dubbed the road to hell race. And I'd always wanted to run the race, and I figured that, like, I'd have a slight advantage because, I mean, it's the road that goes right by my house. It's half my running route when I would go run. And unfortunately, because I also work locally for sports, a lot of the times, because I was so embedded in the running community, my boss would just have me cover the races. So every Saturday morning, instead of getting to run a race, I was there taking photos of the race. And so I actually took the initiative to take that that Independence Day weekend off so I could run the race. And I didn't tell anyone that I was running the race because I was worried that building myself up to it, I'd chicken out. Okay. Because it is such a hard race. And the morning came and I laced up my shoes. I walked down and I registered. I didn't even register beforehand in case I chickened out. And I registered down there, and I'll never forget the look on the rec director's face, because he just looks at me and he goes, "So you're gonna finally run this one?" And I was like, and I pointed at him and I was like, "You make sure I cross that start line." I was like, "Don't let me turn around and sneak off." And I ran it, and I figured if I could do it with a time around 35 minutes, I'd be doing good. And I ran it. And then when I was looking at the sheet after the race and I saw my time, I couldn't believe it. I had actually run it in a little over 27 minutes.
Oh, okay, great.
So compared to like my other 5Ks that I would run, and obviously it was a little bit slower, but those are more flat courses. So the fact that I could run a course with such elevation gain on such a hot day so fast, it reminded me that I'm really good at doubting myself and putting myself down, but I'm capable.
Yes.
I've put in the work and I've done the work. And it was another reminder, just like all my meets that I do. It's a reminder that I'm committed to this enough that I need to stop doubting myself. I can do this. And this right here shows me that I am more than capable of doing these things. But for the worst, I'd have to say it was probably my last powerlifting meet. I knew I was done with powerlifting because it had lost its luster. It didn't have its spark anymore. And it was after a couple of years after I had my son, and I was having a flare with my spinal disorder. So I couldn't do all 3 of the lifts. So when I signed up for it, I did it as just a push and pull. So it was just a bench and a squat. I did okay on my bench, but I missed all 3 of my attempts for my squat just because my head wasn't in it, my heart wasn't in it, and even at that point, my body wasn't in it. And instead of recognizing that I needed to step back, that was one of those times where I pushed myself forward unnecessarily. So my last powerlifting meet was a terrible experience. So it's not the way you want to leave a sport that you've been in for over a decade.
Right.
So I carry that with me every time that I'm getting ready now for my weightlifting meets. I definitely stay more in tuned to my head, my heart, my body, making sure that it is something that I am definitely prepared for, ready to do, and want to do.
Okay. All right. So, what would your message to people who say it's too late to start? We hear that all the time from, adults. We have busy lives. We're, in our 30s, we're in our 40s, even our 50s, and older. And, being fit and being healthy is an important part of life. And when you try to, get people just like, hey, take up walking, take up running, just any type of sport, and they generally say, it's too late. I'm too old. It's too late to start. What would your message to them be?
It is never too late. And it's always, every time I have a client come to me thinking that it's too late, because a lot of moms who've had babies, they realize that they want to get a little bit more active, but they think it's too late. They want to be able to keep up with their kids when their kids start moving, but they feel like they've waited too long. And even my own mother, she never did sports in school. She was never like really super active with us growing up. But when she was in her 50s, she joined the gym and she would go 3 times a week. And so I always use that example. If my mom can start at 50, having absolutely no background whatsoever in being active, then anyone can do it. I mean, my mom helps my dad run 2 businesses. So she is super busy, always on the go. And she started small. And that's what I tell everyone. You start small. If it's 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. And then you build up from there. And you've got to create the habit. Even in your 50s, your 60s, your 70s. I've got a client right now that's in his 80s.
Oh, wow.
I mean, and he's another one, a body in motion stays in motion, but he has a very strong background in sports. He almost qualified for the Olympics when he was younger in track.
Ah,
So he's a little bit of a diamond in the rough kind of story. But like with anybody, we start small. Like my clients who have never done anything before, I always start them small, a couple times a week, just short sessions. And then once you get going, you realize how good your body feels. After you get doing it for a couple of weeks, you notice all these different things that feel different, things even smell different, things even look different. And, you feel so much lighter and
yes.
brighter. And so it's never too late to start.
Yes, yes. And, again, convincing people of that, can be hard sometimes. Sometimes you have to hold a hand and
Yep.
show them like, yes, come on, you can do it just baby steps. And like you said, like, if it's just 10 minutes, 10 minutes. When you get comfortable, try 15 minutes. And if you get comfortable with 15 minutes, do 20 minutes. Just build it up. So you got the opportunity to go back and tell your younger self something. What would it be?
Oh, I would tell her to keep going. It gets better.
Okay. Sometimes it's hard to believe that, but it does.
Yep. And I think a lot of the times younger me hovered on that cusp of giving up on a lot of things because I didn't see the future. I didn't see, like what I was doing all of this for. Because a lot of the times I'd find myself questioning, why am I doing this? What am I doing this for? Why am I giving this up to do this? And things it takes a little bit, but things get better, things click, things start to, move forward in the direction that you've been working towards. It doesn't happen overnight.
Right. All right. So what's a non-athletic fact about you that most people don't know?
Ooh, this is a tricky one. Because I can't say anything about my music tastes, because anyone that follows me on Instagram knows that I have some pretty wild music tastes. And anyone who's seen me knows that I like tattoos. Let's see. Oh, let's see. Oh, I don't know. I'm actually kind of stumped.
A hobby, something that you do that's not fitness related.
Let's see. I read.
You read? Yeah.
I crochet.
Oh, see, I didn't know you crochet.
I experiment in my kitchen quite frequently with new dinner concoctions because, yeah, the old favorites are great, but every now and then you need to change things up. And I always try to make at least one new dish every week for dinner.
Okay. How does your son feel about that? Knowing that he's, 5, 6?
He's actually going to be 7 in a couple of weeks. Okay. He just kind of goes with it. He's got, because of the fact that my food palette is so broad as an adult. And my partner, he's the same way. And of course we're both hunters, and so we've got wild game, and my son just loves venison, and he had his first taste of duck a couple months ago, and he loves that. And so he's got a pretty broad palate, thankfully. So very rarely will he complain about anything, and usually when he complains, it's because there is peppers in something, or he's decided he doesn't like broccoli right now. But otherwise, it's no real big deal. He's just, I think he's used to whatever is gonna get put in front of him is dinner, and he's gonna eat it.
Okay. So what's next for Holly?
And the immediate is I have a weightlifting meet in April. I'm not sure about meets beyond that because things are still kind of weird because of the pandemic.
Right.
But I've started a winter challenge to basically get my sneakers on my feet more and get me out the door more.
Okay.
And I'm using that as kind of like my version of the couch to 5K to get back into running. Because I would like to tackle some races again. But basically to just keep doing what I'm doing to the best of my ability within the constraints life has given me.
I hear you. All right. Any last words for our listeners?
The only thing I can think of is to, if you're doubting it, do it. Even if you're doubting it, do it. Because what's the worst that can happen? You can look back and be like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. You've learned a lesson. Don't do it again.
If you're down it, do it. That's good. Yeah, good advice. All right, Holly, thank you for coming on the show.
No, thank you.
All right, if anybody wanted to get in contact with you, how can they do so?
I am on Instagram. That's really the only place that I've found the energy to invest my time in. I'm on Instagram at Eat, Lift, Run, Yoga. It's pretty easy to remember that one.
Yes. Again, Holly, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the No Gimmicks, Just Sweat podcast. We really appreciate everyone who tunes in each week. If you enjoyed today's show, please support us by subscribing, rating, and reviewing the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember to tell your friends about the No Gimmicks, Just Sweat podcast, so we can continue to have awesome conversations with everyday athletes just like you. Until next time, have an amazing week.